Admiral Kelthorin sat in his chair with bad posture. His body showed signs of many years of military service. His face had scales and many scars from battles. The dim light in the room made his scars more visible. Around him were 12 young
officers who had just finished school. Their eyes were wide with hope and not much experience. "You asked for war stories, young ones?" The Admiral's voice was rough through his translator.
"Fine. But I will not tell you about our great wins against the Screeny Horde or our clever battle plans in the Proxima Nebula campaign." His 4 eyes got smaller, and the inner 2 eyes blinked slowly. "Tonight, I will tell you about the humans." The young officers began to whisper to each other. Humans were new to the Confederation. It had been only 200 years since first contact. Their area in space was small, their ships were not impressive, and their technology was mostly borrowed. "From others, sir," said Lieutenant Zanzar. "The humans, but they are just helper forces at best." The Admiral laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. "That is the most dangerous thing you can think in the whole galaxy, Lieutenant. I was in charge of the 8th Fleet during the Terran incursion. I was there when we first saw what their military could do." He waved to a robot server for a drink of fermented Nula juice. "The humans have a saying, 'Things are not always what they seem.' No species shows this more than they do." "Is this about their lieutenant?" "What was his name?" asked another officer. "Lieutenant Frank Miller," the Admiral said. The human name sounded strange when he said it. "Yes, that's where our learning began. But before I tell you about Lieutenant Miller, you need to understand something basic about humans." The Admiral leaned forward. His voice got quieter, but somehow it filled the room. "In this galaxy, there are hunter species and prey species. Most thinking races came from one or the other. The Variks came from pack hunters. The Kulari came from herd animals that eat plants. We Thorin came from water creatures that hide and then attack suddenly." He stopped talking for a moment to let his words sink in. "Humans came from something else entirely. They were persistence hunters. They did not use claws or poison or great strength. They simply would not stop. Their prey would run, and humans would follow for days, until the prey fell down from being too tired." The Admiral finished his drink. This never giving up, this refusal to stop, it is the base of how they fight in wars. And I learned what it costs at the Battle of Sigma Octantis. Everyone was quiet for a moment. Then the Admiral began to speak again. "Most species in the galaxy evolved to either run away from danger or to attack quickly and win fast. Humans did neither. They came from animals that would chase their food for days, never stopping, never giving up, until the animal they were hunting simply could not run anymore." The young officers looked confused. "Think about what that means," the Admiral continued. "Most predators need to be faster or stronger than their prey, but humans don't. They just need to be more stubborn. They can be slower and weaker and still win, because they don't give up." One of the officers raised a hand. "But surely in modern space warfare this means nothing. Ships fight with advanced weapons, not by chasing each other." The Admiral's outer eyes narrowed. "You would think so. I thought so. The Dravid certainly thought so. We were all wrong." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "Humans bring this same mindset to everything they do, including war. While we seek quick, decisive victories, they are prepared for long conflicts. Where we expect enemies to surrender when defeat is logical, humans see no battle as lost until they are dead." The Admiral turned back to face the young officers. "Their history is full of examples. Small human forces defeating much larger enemies through sheer refusal to accept defeat. Battles where they should have been destroyed but somehow survived. And even won." Lieutenant Zanzar looked troubled. "But they are so physically weak. No natural armor, no claws, not even particularly strong compared to many species." "Yes," the Admiral agreed. "And that is perhaps their greatest advantage. Because they know they are weak, they never rely on strength. They rely on cleverness, on working together, and on a level of aggression that would shock most species." He returned to his seat, signaling for another drink. "I will tell you about our first real meeting with human military forces. It happened in what they call their year 2157. My 8th Fleet was sent to look into strange activity in the Sigma Octantis system. This was an area recently settled by humans. The Admiral's side limbs moved in an agitated way as he remembered. Our intelligence said Dravid raiders were in the area. Simple pirates, we thought. We expected to find a few human settlements under attack, perhaps already destroyed. Instead, we found 3 Dravid dreadnoughts disabled and floating in space. Lieutenant Zanzar's face ridges turned a different color in disbelief. Dravid dreadnoughts, disabled by human defenses. No, the Admiral corrected. By a single human ship. The UES Dauntless. No one spoke after hearing this. The Dauntless was 1/5 the size of a Dravid dreadnought, with technology at least 1 generation behind Confederation standards. It should have been destroyed in seconds. Instead, it had managed to cripple 3 enemy capital ships. And the Admiral signaled for another drink. We made contact and met their commander, Captain John Rivers, a plain-looking human with a manner so calm it was unsettling. When we said we were surprised at their victory, he simply shrugged and said they had to make do. Kelthorin gestured toward the window where distant stars shined. The Dauntless had no military AI, no quantum weapons, no phase shields. What they had was a crew that refused to accept defeat. Captain Rivers showed me their battle recordings. The Admiral's voice got quieter. The Dravid attacked their colony without warning. Standard tactics: destroy orbital defenses, then send ground forces. But the Dauntless was being repaired in a hidden dock facility. Rather than run away or give up when 3 dreadnoughts appeared, they launched with half their systems not working. One of the younger officers leaned forward. How did they fight? They fought in unexpected ways. The Dauntless did a burn that would have killed most species, speeding up so fast that it strained even their reinforced bodies. They aimed at engine parts with normal warheads, not to destroy but to create fields of debris. Then they used those debris fields as cover to get closer and send what they called boarding teams. They boarded Dravid vessels. The question came from multiple officers at the same time. Yes, while still under fire. In suits that offered little protection, armed mainly with... The Admiral's translator seemed to struggle with the word shotguns. Weapons that shoot. Small metal pieces? Someone asked in disbelief. Simple, yes, but they work well in the tight spaces of a ship corridor, and they terrified Dravid warriors who had never seen such weapons. I watched their helmet recordings. The human boarding parties lost 40% of their people but never slowed down. They captured the first Dreadnought's bridge in less than 20 minutes. The Admiral's outer eyes closed briefly. With 1 Dreadnought captured, they used its weapons to disable the engines of the others. Classic human approach, they call it divide and conquer. He sat back in his chair, looking at each young officer in turn. This is why I tell you about humans. Not because they are the strongest or have the best technology. I tell you because they are the most dangerous species I have ever encountered. They look harmless, they seem friendly. But when they fight... His voice trailed off, and for a moment, the hardened old Admiral seemed almost afraid. When humans fight, they bring with them thousands of years of being the creatures that would not stop, would not give up, would follow their prey until it could no longer run. Remember this, younglings. Underestimate humans at your peril. The young officers sat in silence as Admiral Kelthorin took another sip of his drink. The story of the Dauntless had left them stunned. The Admiral seemed lost in thought for a moment before he continued. 6 cycles after the Sigma Octantis incident, we got a call for help from Outpost Zenith 7, the Admiral said. It was a science research station near what humans call the Kuiper Belt of their home system. He sat up straighter, his military training showing as he remembered the mission. The outpost had gone quiet. The Confederation Council was worried that important research had been taken. My flagship, the Indomitable, was sent with a human officer to help us, Lieutenant Frank Miller. The Admiral's eyes looked far away. Lieutenant Miller did not look special. He was short for a human with what they call red hair, quiet and respectful. He spent most of the trip studying how our ship worked, asking questions about our weapons and defense systems. I thought he was just curious. Kelthorin. moved his hand, and a picture of Outpost Zenith 7 appeared in the air. We arrived to find the outpost still there, but not answering our calls. Our normal way of doing things said we should send a drone to look first, then a security team if it was safe. Lieutenant Miller asked to join the security team. I had no reason to say no, so I agreed. The Admiral's voice changed, showing a respect that the young officers rarely heard from him. The security team found the outpost's crew dead, not from weapons but from a sickness made in a lab, a bioweapon created by Hektha separatists, and they were still on the station. One of the officers gasped. The Hektha rebellion had been one of the bloodiest fights in recent Confederation history. The Hektha attacked our security team in the main laboratory. 9 of our best Thorin warriors and Lieutenant Miller against 17 Hektha fighters. The Hektha had planned well. They used devices that disabled our advanced weapons. The team was trapped and they could not call for help. The Admiral paused, his eyes seeing the past. What happened next I only know from the report of the one security officer who lived in the station's partly fixed cameras. Lieutenant Miller took charge when the team leader fell. He gathered the disabled weapons and moved back to a narrow service hallway. Kelthorin showed a map of the area. It was a spot they could defend, but they were surrounded. No way out. The smart choice was to give up. Instead, Miller took apart the disabled weapons and used parts to make simple bombs. He put the wounded behind walls for protection and told each person which area to shoot at. The Admiral's voice got softer. The Hektha attacked in waves. The first wave met homemade bombs. The second ran into walls and careful defensive fire from weapons Miller had partly fixed. By the third wave, they were fighting hand to hand. He turned off the map display. Lieutenant Miller was not a big human. He had no natural weapons, no claws, no poison spikes, no extra strong muscles. What he had was a metal pipe pulled from the corridor wall and what humans call combat training. The Admiral's voice carried a hint of what might have been fear. When we finally broke through the Hektha jamming and reached them, Lieutenant Miller was the only one still fighting. He had many plasma burns, a poison knife wound in his stomach, and was badly hurt all over his body. He stood in a hallway, full of dead Hektha. Behind him, 3 wounded Thorin were still alive. No one in the room made a sound. When our help team arrived, he did not drop his weapon right away. His eyes were not those of a thinking being in that moment. They were the eyes of something ancient and terrible. It took him several seconds to see that we were friendly. The Admiral looked around at the shocked faces of his audience. Lieutenant Miller lived, but barely. When I visited him in the medical bay, I asked why he had not given up when logically there was no hope. He seemed confused by the question. The mission wasn't done, sir, he said, and my people needed protecting. Kelthorin's side limbs shook slightly. The Hektha had planned to release the bioweapon into Sol's asteroid mining colonies. Millions would have died. Lieutenant Miller's action stopped this. For his service, he got something humans call the Silver Star. He seemed embarrassed by the attention. The Admiral sat up straight. This was just my first real lesson about humans in combat. The most disturbing thing I learned came during the Krell incursion, when I saw not just their bravery but their ability for calculated ruthlessness. He paused to let his words sink in. The Krell incursion happened in what humans call their year 2172. The Krell, a species not part of the Confederation from the Carina Sagittarius arm, began attacking outer colony worlds. He showed a star map of the area. The Confederation was slow to help. The colonies were far away and not important for strategy, but among them was a human settlement, New Anchorage. About 20,000 humans lived there, small by Confederation standards. The Admiral's face darkened. The Confederation Council talked about sending help. During these talks, the Krell started a full invasion of New Anchorage. We got their call for help, but the nearest Confederation battle group was 3 weeks away. The humans, however, had a small destroyer squadron just 7 days out. Lieutenant Zanzar frowned. A destroyer squadron against an invasion force? Yes. 5 human ships against a Krell war fleet of 19 capital ships. The human squadron was led by Captain Lisa Reeves of the UES Intrepid. When told about the situation, she reportedly said only, "We're on our way," and ended the call. The Admiral changed the display to show battle plans. Our experts predicted total loss of the human squadron. I personally sent a message to Captain Reeves telling her to wait for Confederation support. She said she got my message and kept going. Kelthoran's outer eyes narrowed. What I didn't understand, was that the humans had no plan to fight the Krell fleet directly. They had another plan. The display changed to show the new Anchorage colony. When they arrived in the system, the human squadron split up, following a path that let them send down dropships. They landed about 300 Marines on the surface while the Krell were focused on their ships. One of the officers tilted her head. 300 against an invasion force? What possible difference could they make? The Admiral's voice became very calm. Those 300 humans organized the colonists. New Anchorage was not a military settlement, but it was a hard world that attracted a certain type of human. Resourceful, tough. The Marines gave them weapons, trained them in days, and set up what humans call a guerrilla resistance. The Admiral leaned forward, his eyes intense. "This is the most important lesson I can teach you about humans. They have a saying, adapt, improvise, overcome. When facing greater numbers or superior technology, they don't fight fair. They change the rules of the game entirely." He looked around at the young officers. "In my long career, I have fought many battles against many species. I have seen bravery, skill, and determination from countless warriors. But I have never seen anything like the sheer will of humans when their backs are against the wall." The Admiral's voice grew quiet, almost as if he was speaking to himself. "They don't know when they're beaten, and that makes them the most dangerous species in the galaxy." The holographic display showed the new Anchorage colony as Admiral Kelthoran continued his story. The young officers leaned forward, captivated by the tale of human resistance. The Krell took control of the ground easily, but found they only controlled empty buildings, the Admiral said. Every night the humans would attack targets and then disappear. They destroyed supply centers, damaged communication towers, and ambushed patrols. They used simple but effective bombs triggered by pressure or tripwires. The Admiral's translator seemed to struggle as he continued. Meanwhile, the human destroyer squadron did what they called hit-and-run attacks. They never fought directly, but would appear at the edge of a system, fire a bunch of missiles, and vanish into faster-than-light travel before the Krell could respond well. These were small attacks, causing minimal damage, but they forced the Krell to stay on constant alert. He showed a timeline of the conflict. This continued for 18 days. The Krell became more and more aggressive in their search operations, which was exactly what the humans wanted. They lured Krell patrols into prepared traps. City areas became death traps, buildings set to collapse, intersections turned into kill zones with crossing fields of fire. The Admiral paused, letting the meaning sink in. By the time Confederation forces arrived, the Krell had lost about 40% of their ground forces and 3 capital ships. More importantly, they had lost all order as a fighting force. They were tired, paranoid, jumping at shadows. Kelthoran closed the display. The human civilian deaths were high, nearly 6,000 dead, but they never gave up. Captain Reeves later told me something I will never forget. She said, "Admiral, you should understand that humans don't need to win. We just need the enemy to lose." He looked around at the silent officers. After it was over, I toured the colony with a human officer named Major Paul Carter. I asked him how civilians had fought so well. His answer still haunts me. He said, "Every human is about 3 meals away from becoming a stone-cold killer. We're all descended from top predators who survived ice ages and plagues. Civilization is just a thin cover." The Admiral's side limbs shuddered slightly. But the most disturbing part of human warfare was still to be shown to me. That came during the Battle of Proxima Centauri, when I saw their ultimate weapon. Admiral Kelthoran looked at the young officers, their expressions a mix of disbelief and growing worry. Good. They needed to understand. The Battle of Proxima Centauri happened in 2178, he continued, the peak of the Krell conflict. The Confederation had finally committed its full might to the war, but we underestimated Krell determination. They gathered their entire fleet, over 500 vessels, for a decisive strike against humanity's Alpha Centauri colonies. The admiral brought up a battle map. I commanded the Confederation's First Fleet, 112 capital ships with support vessels. We joined with the Human Defense Fleet, 76 vessels of different capabilities. We prepared a normal defense in depth, with layered formations designed to absorb and counter the Krell advance. His eyes fixed on a point in the display. 2 days before the expected Krell arrival, I was invited to a strategy meeting aboard the human flagship, UES Constitution. Their overall commander was Admiral William Boyd, an older human with gray hair and a manner so calm it bordered on detachment. Kelthorin's posture stiffened at the memory. Boyd listened to our defensive strategy, asked a few questions, then quietly suggested a different approach. He called it Operation Hellfire. When he outlined the plan, I was disturbed. The Admiral changed the display, showing a complex orbital setup. The humans proposed using their civilian mining vessels, 98 ships equipped with powerful drills and fusion cutters designed for asteroid mining. These ships would be loaded with something humans call thermonuclear devices and positioned within the debris field surrounding Proxima Centauri. One of the officers leaned forward. They wanted to use civilian ships as weapons. Yes, the Admiral confirmed. The mining vessels would appear to be hiding, but would actually be waiting. When the Krell fleet engaged our defensive formation, the miners would activate their drives at maximum burn and aim directly for Krell capital ships. Kelthorin's side limbs trembled slightly. I objected, of course, these were civilian vessels, not military. The crews were not soldiers. Admiral Boyd acknowledged this, then informed me that every mining crew had unanimously volunteered when asked. The display shifted to show the actual battle formation. I did not understand humans then as I do now. I thought surely they would reconsider, that their civilian leadership would reject such a plan. I was wrong. Not only did they approve it, but when I expressed my concerns about using civilian vessels, their representative seemed confused. Admiral, she said, in human history, when existence is threatened, there are no civilians. The Admiral's voice dropped lower. The Krell arrived as expected with more ships and good formation. Our combined fleets fought according to plan, appearing to give ground gradually. The Krell advanced into the debris field, focused entirely on our military vessels, the holographic display animated, showing the movement of forces. That's when Operation Hellfire began. 98 mining vessels, each piloted by volunteer crews, activated their drives at the same time. The Krell detected the sudden energy signatures, but classified them as non-fighters trying to flee. Kelthorin's 4 eyes seemed to lose focus as he recalled the scene. The mining ships accelerated to maximum speed on direct collision courses. The Krell realized too late what was happening. Their defense systems were pointed toward our military vessels, their shields set up for energy, weapons, not physical impacts. The display showed the mining vessels closing with the Krell formation. 43 mining ships were destroyed before reaching their targets. The remaining 55 hit Krell capital ships at tremendous speed, exploding their nuclear payloads. On impact, the effect was devastating. The simulation showed massive explosions blooming across the Krell fleet. 29 Krell dreadnoughts destroyed in the first wave. Their formation shattered. While they tried to regroup, our combined military forces executed a coordinated attack on their disorganized fleet. The battle lasted just under 7 hours. The Krell suffered 83% losses. They never recovered as a military power. The Admiral closed down the display. The human casualties were total. All 98 mining ships lost with all hands. 714 humans who were not soldiers, not trained for war, not forced by anything except their own will. Silence filled the officers' lounge. After the battle, I attended a ceremony humans call a memorial service. Admiral Boyd read the names of every mining crew member. It took hours. For each ship, he read a short phrase. They gave the last full measure of devotion. Kelthorin's translator struggled with his next words. I asked a human officer, Commander Steve Martinez, how they could celebrate such a terrible sacrifice. His answer has shaped my understanding of humans ever since. He said, "We don't celebrate the dying admiral. We celebrate that they were the kind of people who would do this for others." The admiral sat straight in his chair, His military bearing fully returned. The young officers remained silent, processing the shocking story of Operation Hellfire. That, young officers, is why I tell you about humans, Admiral Kelthorin said. Not because of their technology or their numbers, but because of what they are willing to do. In my long career, I have met many species who will die for duty or honor or even ideas. The humans are the only species I have ever met who will die for each other. He looked around the circle of stunned faces. The Confederation classified humans as a minor species with limited military potential. That is a terrible misunderstanding. They are individually adaptable, collectively resourceful, and have a unique psychology that makes them both incredibly cooperative and terrifyingly ruthless when threatened. Lieutenant Zanzar raised her hand nervously. Admiral, you've told us 3 stories about human warfare. Are there other incidents that stand out in your memory? The Admiral's 4 eyes blinked slowly, one pair after the other. Yes, many. But perhaps I should tell you about the incident at Tau Ceti. It demonstrates yet another aspect of human warfare that makes them unique. He adjusted his position, seeming to gather his thoughts. This occurred in 2183, after the Krell conflict had ended. A group of pirates, a mixed band of outcasts from various species, had established a base in the Tau Ceti system. They were raiding shipping lanes, attacking civilian vessels. The Admiral called up a new star chart. The Confederation dispatched a task force to eliminate the threat. I commanded the operation. We had 14 vessels, more than enough to handle a pirate band. We also had 1 human ship attached to our force, the UES Relentless, commanded by Captain Alan Wright. Kelthorin's outer eyes narrowed at the memory. The pirates had a base on an airless moon, well fortified, with defensive batteries and shields. Our plan was conventional. Bombard from orbit, reduce their defenses, then send in troops to clean up survivors. Captain Wright requested a meeting before we began our attack. The Admiral's side limbs moved in an agitated manner. He proposed an alternative approach. Rather than bombard the base, he suggested his ship could deploy a small team to infiltrate the facility. I was skeptical. The base had significant defenses and was built into the moon's regolith, making it difficult to approach unseen. The holographic display showed the pirate base. Captain Wright explained they had developed what they called an Earth glide vehicle, essentially a sled that would allow operators to move across the surface while remaining in physical contact with it. This would generate no heat signature and minimal dust, making it nearly impossible to detect. Lieutenant Zanzar frowned. Why not just use stealth shuttles? The pirates had advanced sensor arrays specifically designed to detect engine emissions, the Admiral replied. The Earth glide vehicles were mechanical, using momentum and low-power electric motors. Primitive but effective for the situation. The Admiral gestured, and the display zoomed in on the base. I was still doubtful, but I allowed Captain Wright to attempt his approach. 6 humans in what they called tactical spacesuits deployed from the Relentless using these glide vehicles. They crossed 15 kilometers of lunar surface completely undetected. The display showed the team's path. They accessed the base through a maintenance airlock. What happened next, I watched through their helmet feeds. The 6-person team moved through the base with extraordinary coordination. They used non-explosive breaching tools to access secure areas. They communicated using a system of hand signals rather than radio transmissions. The Admiral's voice grew quieter. The team reached the base's control center and power core. They planted devices they called EMP charges, weapons designed to emit a powerful electromagnetic pulse. This would disable electronic systems without causing structural damage. Kelthorin paused. This is important to understand. They could have simply destroyed the base. Instead, they specifically chose a method that would disable it while minimizing loss of life. When I asked Captain Wright about this choice, he said, "Dead pirates. Tell no tales, Admiral. We need intelligence more than we need corpses." The Admiral's appendages moved in what the young officers recognized as their species equivalent of a thoughtful nod. The EMPs worked perfectly. The base lost all power and communications. The pirate crews were completely disoriented. Our forces were able to board and capture the base with minimal casualties on either side. We gained access to the pirates' data systems, which led us to 3 more of their hidden bases. He closed the tactical display. What impressed me was not just the success of the mission, but its efficiency. 6 humans accomplished what would have required a full Confederation infantry battalion, with far less risk and better results. When I commented on this to Captain Wright, he simply said it was standard special operations procedure. The Admiral looked directly at Lieutenant Zanzar. This brings me to another key aspect of human warfare. They have a concept they call force multiplication. The idea that a small, well-trained team with the right equipment and approach can have the impact of a much larger force. While most species in the Confederation rely on technological superiority or numerical advantages, humans focus on maximizing the effectiveness of individual soldiers. One of the other young officers spoke up. But Admiral, surely special operations are not unique to humans. Many species have elite units. Yes, Kelthorin agreed. But there is a difference. Most species view such units as exceptional, used, rarely for special circumstances. Humans view this approach as standard. They would rather send 6 perfectly trained operatives than 600 adequate ones. The Admiral's voice took on a lecturing tone. They have a military philosophy that values quality over quantity in a way few other species do. They believe, and have repeatedly demonstrated, that training, adaptability, and initiative are more valuable than numbers or even technology. He leaned back in his chair. This is why I tell you these stories, because someday you may command ships with human crew members or serve alongside human vessels. You need to understand that they do not think like we do. They do not fight like we do, and if you try to force them into our tactical doctrines, you will waste their unique capabilities. Lieutenant Zanzar looked thoughtful. Is that why the Confederation has special protocols for human integration into our forces? Exactly, the Admiral said. Those protocols weren't created to accommodate human weaknesses. They were created to leverage human strengths. He gazed around at the young officers. Remember this. Humans appear physically weaker than most Confederation species. Their technology is less advanced than many, but they compensate through innovation, adaptation, and a level of individual initiative that would be considered insubordination in many of our cultures. The Admiral's voice grew solemn. And remember one thing above all, never push humans to the point where they have nothing left to lose, because that is when they are most dangerous. Admiral Kelthorin looked at his audience of young officers. Their expressions showed that his stories had affected them deeply. Good. That was his intention. I have one final story to share, the Admiral said. One that perhaps reveals the most disturbing aspect of human warfare. What happened during the Arcturus Rebellion? Several of the officers exchanged glances. The Arcturus Rebellion was recent enough that most had heard of it, but the details were classified. The Arcturus system was a human colony that declared independence from their government, the Admiral explained. They seized control of orbital platforms and planetary defense systems. The human authorities asked for Confederation assistance in resolving the situation. He signaled for a fresh drink. I was assigned as the Confederation liaison aboard the human command vessel UES Guardian under Admiral Carol Peterson. She was a veteran of multiple campaigns, highly decorated. I expected her to take aggressive action based on my previous experiences with human military leaders. The Admiral's 4 eyes blinked slowly. Instead, she did something I found puzzling. She opened communications with the rebel leadership. For 3 weeks, she talked with them. Daily conversations about their grievances, their demands, their ideals. I thought it was a waste of time, but she insisted it was essential. Lieutenant, Zanzar tilted her head. A delaying tactic? That's what I assumed, the Admiral said. But it was more than that. During these conversations, Admiral Peterson was learning about the rebels. Not just their military capabilities, but their psychology, their motivations, their relationships with each other. Kelthorin's voice grew softer. She was creating what humans call a psychological profile of the rebel leadership, understanding not just how they fought, but how they thought, what they valued, what they feared. The Admiral straightened in his chair. After 3 weeks, she presented her plan. The rebel leadership had 3 main figures: a former military officer named George Ellis, a political idealist named Diane Harris, and a technical genius named Peter Lee. Together, they formed a balanced leadership triangle. Admiral Peterson's plan was to remove just one, Ellis, the military leader. One of the young officers leaned forward. "Through assassination?" "No," the admiral said sharply. "That was my first thought as well, but Admiral Peterson explained that killing Ellis would make him a martyr. Instead, she wanted to discredit him." Calthorin's side limbs moved in agitation. Using the psychological profile she had developed, Peterson crafted a plan that exploited the hidden tensions between the 3 leaders. Through careful manipulation of communications, selective release of intelligence, and a series of small military feints, she created the impression that Ellis was secretly negotiating with the human government for his own benefit. The admiral's voice carried a hint of reluctant admiration. It worked perfectly. Harris and Lee turned against Ellis. The rebel force fractured along lines of loyalty. They began fighting among themselves. Within days, the rebellion collapsed without the Guardian firing a single shot in direct combat. Silence filled the room. "This is what I find most unsettling about human warfare," Admiral Calthorin continued. "Not their bravery or their adaptability or their sacrifice. Those are admirable qualities. What is truly alien about humans is their understanding of psychology as a weapon." He looked around at the young officers. "In the Confederation, we view warfare as a physical contest. Ships, weapons, soldiers. Humans see it as much more. They study their enemies as thinking beings. They identify psychological weaknesses and exploit them as ruthlessly as any physical vulnerability." Lieutenant Zanzar appeared troubled. "That seems dishonorable." "By our standards, perhaps," the admiral agreed. "But humans have a saying. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. They consider it more ethical to win through psychological means than through bloodshed." Calthorin's translator seemed to struggle with his next words. "After the Arcturus operation, I asked Admiral Peterson why she chose this approach over a conventional assault. Her answer was very human. She said, 'Because live colonists can still become good citizens, dead ones can't.'" The admiral drained his drink. "This is the final lesson I want you to understand about humans. They are capable of incredible violence when necessary, but they are equally capable of remarkable restraint when it serves their purposes. This flexibility, this ability to shift between extreme aggression and calculated patience, makes them unpredictable in ways that few other species are." Another officer raised a hand. "Admiral, given all you've told us, do you consider humans a threat to the Confederation?" Calthorin was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "Not as long as our interests align with theirs. Humans are aggressive, yes, but not expansionist by nature. They fight fiercely to protect what they consider theirs, but rarely to conquer what belongs to others." The admiral's posture relaxed slightly. "What I do consider dangerous is misunderstanding them, treating them as just another member species, without appreciating their unique psychology and capabilities. That is why the Confederation treaty with humans has such unusual provisions." Lieutenant Zanzar's facial ridges darkened with surprise. The restrictions on bioweapon research, the prohibition against targeting human civilian populations? "Yes," the admiral confirmed. "Those provisions were not designed to protect humans from us. They were designed to protect us from humans." He gazed out at the stars. "Because if there is one thing I have learned in my long career, it is this. Humans make excellent friends and terrible enemies, and which they become depends greatly on how you treat them." The admiral stood, signaling the end of the gathering. "You are the next generation of Confederation officers. Some of you will command mixed crews. Some will work alongside human vessels. Some may even find yourselves facing humans in combat. Though I pray to the ancestral waters this never happens." He looked at each young officer in turn. "When you deal with humans, remember my stories. Remember their persistence, their adaptability, their willingness to sacrifice, their understanding of psychology as a weapon. Remember that they rarely think or act as we expect them to. Admiral Kelthorin moved toward the exit but paused for a final remark. And remember one last thing. A human commander once told me this, and I have found it to be universally true. Humans can forgive an enemy who fights honorably. They will never forgive one who doesn't. As the Admiral left the officers' lounge, the young officers remained seated, their usual chatter absent. Each was lost in thought, contemplating the stories they had heard and the species they now understood a little better, and perhaps feared a little more. Lieutenant Zanzar was the last to leave. As she stood at the viewport, looking out at the stars where human worlds turned in their orbits, she wondered which she would rather have, humans as allies or as enemies. The answer was obvious, but it led to a more troubling question. What would it take to turn them from one to the other? She didn't know, but she was certain of one thing. She never wanted to find out.